Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special edition tonight of Such Good Shoot, the podcast about anything and everything wrestling, coming to you live from the Creaky Tiki Studios and all around the world tonight. You know, we got our normal people here tonight. We got right above me, we got my man Shane. Over that way, we have Isaac.
What's up?
But over here, we have our very, very special guest tonight, Duke, the Dumpster Drose.
Welcome.
Thanks for being here, man.
And this is
thanks for having me on the show, man. Thank you very much.
Oh, we're really excited. And that was actually a very important thing for us because I think that's the first time you've actually managed to point to everybody correctly.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring it up, but I mean, that was a spectacular performance, Dozer.
The Brady Bunch gimmick, I like it.
Credit where credit's due. Absolutely. So first of all, we're really glad to have you on here. We've been talking a lot about this all day, especially, but and just like looking at your win-loss record, man, like right off the bat, you have a better win-loss record than Chris Jericho, man.
Really?
That's
funny because I don't even know what my win-loss record was, but
I don't know what the percentage is, but that was one of the statistics that got brought up today.
That is interesting.
Wow. So you got that, man. You got that.
So I got that going for me.
Yeah. What are your first memories of professional wrestling, and where did that first come into your life?
I grew up in Miami, Florida, and I used to watch championship wrestling from Florida with Gordon Soley. Grew up on that, man. Weekends, me and my brother sometimes, but he wasn't as into it as I was. But I was always watching wrestling, and that's what really started it for me. But I always tell people the one thing that solidified me wanting to become a professional wrestler was WrestleMania 1. Me and my dad went and watched it in an arena, Miami Beach Convention Center, on closed circuit television. There was no pay-per-view in those days.
Yeah.
And, the hype of the whole show, the way he presented it, you knew Vince was doing something completely different. And the hype behind the Hulk Hogan, Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff match, man, they had me hooked. And I just remember standing up right in the middle of the show and telling my dad, I said, I want to be a professional wrestler. And from that point on, I started working to become one.
Well, and how old were you at that point?
I was still in high school. I was, it was probably, I want to say, I don't know, was it 85 or 84? Was WrestleMania 1, but I was probably either a junior or getting ready to become a senior in high school.
Yeah, probably spring 85 sounds right, but
yeah, I was still probably a junior.
Wow. And then to go from there, and so after high school, I mean, what got you in the door there, starting to work in the territories down in Florida?
Well, I started training while I was still in high school. The funny thing was I was on the wrestling team for just like 2 years, but at the end of my senior year, towards the end of the senior year, or that season, I should say, we did a fundraiser where we brought in the championship wrestling from Florida people to do a show in our gym, and they did a fundraiser for us. So it was like Barry Windham and Lex Luger were there and all these guys, and my dad went in the locker room and found out where there was a school locally in Miami.
Oh, wow.
And it was in Opelika. Yeah, this guy, Tyree Pride, the Haitian sensation, his tag team partner was running the school, a guy named Bobby Wales, and that's who trained me. And another guy who trained there with us at certain times was Norman Smiley. He was in there too. He was known as Black Magic in those days. But that's how I started. And I started doing what you would call the independent circuit in Florida back then, but it wasn't like the indies now. It was, if you wrestled once a month or once every 2 weeks, you were lucky. Yeah. And I was going to college at the University of Miami, so I was doing that and wrestling where I could get shows on the side just to get experience while I was kind of building up and also going through college. So that's how it started.
And so right off the bat, I mean, you got your name. A buddy sort of gave you the name early on, right? Your original name, which I think is a fucking awesome.
I do. I still love that name.
Rocco Gibraltar, man.
Yeah, Rocco Gibraltar. This guy in my fraternity at freaking University of Miami. We're all hanging around getting drunk one night at a party, and he was like, "Yeah, you need to be Rocco Gibraltar." I mean, they came up with a lot of stupid names during these drunk parties, but that was a good one. And I held on to that one. And I just remember as I was finishing college and still wrestling part-time, I started thinking, okay, I need to come up with a gimmick for this that Vince will like. And eventually I remember the first time I said the garbage man, Rocco Gibraltar. I mean, it just hit on all cylinders. It was, there was alliteration. There was blue collar babyface written all over it. There was, right up Vince's alley for what he was doing at that time.
Oh, it was the era of all the
gimmicks. So that's what I went with. And I did a lot of tape and stuff like that so I could create a promotional package. And man, it was that character held on, and they took it as it was. They just changed the name to Duke the Dumpster.
Yeah, which is just like so disappointing to me when I know that Rocco Gibraltar was on the table. But
the more I hear it, the better it sounds. I love it.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah,
it's perfect, man. It really is an incredible name. I'm like, as soon as the first time I heard it, I was like,
yeah, they should have went with that name actually, but
no, I mean it would have been great, but I mean it sort of feels like par for the course with some of the shit that goes on there. And I mean, is that like you really went out of your way and like took your career into your own hands in a lot of ways, and you went and produced with VHS tapes in what, 94, 93, 94 you were doing this?
Yeah, it was 93, definitely 93. That was when I graduated from the University of Miami, and me and my brother, I had accumulated a lot of tape as Rocco Gibraltar, the garbage man. So I put together a promo package with, I had a promo interview at the beginning. I had a highlight reel in the middle and a full match at the end. And then I had I put together this little resume of all the stuff I had done. And I got some promo pictures made. And then I was going to drive across the country and try to get a job. But right before I was ready to do that, I was reading the paper in Miami, the Miami Herald. They were talking about the steroid scandal and how Hulk Hogan was jumping to WCW. And at the end of the article, there was a statement that just said Vince McMahon, who was in attendance at this convention, had no comment. See, they were at a convention in Miami Beach. It was called the NatP convention. It was for TV executives, basically selling shows. And the WWF had a booth, and the WCW had a booth. And when I found out they were there, I knew a guy that was an executive at a local station, Channel 2, Miami Channel 2, and it was a PBS station, but he was an executive, and he had credentials for this freaking convention that he let me use. He goes, "Sure, take them. Go ahead." I saw him walk right in the door, and I walked right in the door wearing a suit with this guy's credentials, and I walked right up to Vince McMahon and shook his hand and introduced myself and pitched him for probably about 45 seconds or so. And he asked me a couple questions, and I answered him, and then I got the hell out of there. And I did not go by the WCW booth either. I went straight out to the.
You just went you went to the man. What's going through your head when you're just pitching Vince McMahon? Is it just you just autopilot
big time? It was just do it. As a matter of fact, it took place. It's funny because it all came together basically overnight. One day, I was reading the paper at the job I was working at, and the next morning I was walking in the front door of the convention center. So I didn't give myself time to overthink it. I just did it, and I guess that was the thought, was just go, just do it. Just do it. My mom always told me, she said, you've already got a no for an answer. So now it's up to you to go try and get a yes. by go do this and get yourself a yes for an answer. And
what's the worst that can happen in that scenario?
He's gonna say no, and I'm right back where I was. So
or you can't find him or something. So, but that's amazing. And I think we all watched at least what's on YouTube, what's available on YouTube of that promo video, and it's you like in in front of a huge pile of garbage, giving an interview, which was really good, especially considering like it was 93 or 92, whenever it was actually taken. And then you had a banging Cool Mo D song on there.
Yeah. A lot of that just fell together by luck, man. I mean, I knew it was a good song, titled I Go to Work. And it was such a good rap song. And when we put those highlights in, we just laid them across it. It just fell into place by accident. There was no computer with editing software on a laptop that you could use back then. It was 2 VCRs and me going back and forth and putting this highlight on, highlight on, this highlight on, and all these highlights from different matches.
You're making a mixtape.
My brother just played the music over the top of it, and it was like stuff started hitting on time, right at the perfect moment, and we were like, "Wow, that came out really good."
and just the crowd reactions you were getting in those smaller venues was incredible.
I was over down in Florida, man. The problem was when I got to the WWF, I let them start to change me, especially a lot of those agents in the back, man. They, a lot of them got their own agendas, and they, like you talked about the interview on that tape. Listen, I was a huge Road Warriors fan, and I patterned my interviews at that time after like Hawk. I loved his interviews, and I tried to pattern the way I did promos that way. First thing, when I walked through the door and did my first promo, they said, "Stop yelling." I said, "Don't yell in interviews, because then it doesn't mean anything if you yell later in an important match." They had these stupid philosophies. It's like, I should have known better and just got myself over with what worked in Florida, but I let them change me in a lot of ways. And they were changing a lot of the things I did in Florida, also the way I wrestled and the things I was doing. And I was so happy to be there and so worried about pissing somebody off that I would basically do what everybody told me to do, when I really should have just stuck with what got me over before that.
Yeah. Sometimes follow your instinct. And I mean, was there a certain sense of disappointment once you finally got there, and sort of what was going on, and how, and just sort of what the backstage shit was like? And
well, you realize pretty fast there was clicks, and literally and figuratively click. There was certain guys that had power and certain guys that didn't, and you had to figure out what kind of guy you were going to be. Were you going to be like, I was pretty much my own guy, and if I liked you, I liked you. And if I didn't like you, I told you I didn't like you. That's not really playing the politics game very well. I tried to get along with everybody, and I did for the most part, and I always had fun. But you could tell pretty quick who had the power and everybody else who didn't. They were constantly bitter and angry, and I didn't want to be that person either. But I did end up getting pretty bitter at the end of my little run there. But you could tell pretty quick how the politics in the back worked. And so if you were either going to be an ass kisser, or you were going to be your own man and stand up on your own 2 feet, and that could end up getting you out of there pretty quick. So I tried to be my own man, and I left after 2.5 years. It was what it was. But again, I tried to get along with everybody. I always tried to.
Well, I mean, and it was a super memorable run too. I mean, for such a short one. I mean, that's one of the things that is really like impressive about it. And you were, I mean, even before that, weren't you ranked? Was it before you went there? You were ranked number 500. And
it's funny, all that
EWI?
all that came together like just at the same time. I was finishing. I graduated college. I was getting ready to, I was putting my notice at my job. I was getting ready to drive all across the country, trying to get in on one of the last remaining territories. And a buddy, this guy I knew down in Florida, I think it was Bobby. He wrestled as Bobby Rogers. He was like supposedly the nephew of Buddy Rogers, but he wasn't. But anyway, he knew guys like he knew the Pro Wrestling Illustrated people, and he told me they were doing this thing, this PWI 500, top 500 or whatever. And he said that everybody remembers number one. He said they're interested in making you the number 500. So I was like, I didn't care. I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I'd love to be in that magazine. It's a magazine I grew up reading, right? And he goes, yeah, everybody remembers number one and number 500. I was like, okay. So anyway, I did that. They made me number 500 under the name just the Garbage Man. That's all they called me. They didn't call me Rocco Gibraltar. And literally within a month or so after that, I was walking up, or right around the same time I was walking up to Vince at that convention. Wow. So I got myself a tryout, and they thought they had something to do with it. So then they wrote another article saying they got me hired in the WWF, which they did not. The WWF didn't know anything about the PWI 500 or where I was ranked on it. But it was all good, still, good press, bad press, just spell the name right. More interviews. It was fine with me.
That's wild though, to get that kind of exposure before you're even on, the radar of those guys, and then to go and independently put yourself out there and make it happen. So you get them writing that article because again, it's like, fuck it, people are talking at that point.
Yeah, that's, like I said, it's good. Any kind of press was good.
Yeah. And when you were talking about when you first got there and just some of the politics and listening and to people maybe that you shouldn't have, one of the things that you've talked about is when you were riding with Brett and the Austin thing, and I'm just sort of curious a little bit about that. And when
I was there, I was wrapped up in it and in the moment constantly and not thinking much. And there was a lot of times when things were kind of going south for me. They weren't booking me the way I wanted to be booked, and they were killing me on TV, and they weren't having me on the road and all this stuff. And there was times where I asked Bret Hart for advice, and the first time it was at a TV, and Steve Austin came in. He just started. He was the ringmaster, and I think I was going to be his first match. At that point, they were using me so little on TV. I left my bags in the car. That's how bad it was. I was like, I knew I wasn't going to be on TV, so I just sat around in my street clothes. Somebody made a change at the last second, said, hey, we got you wrestling. Go get your gear, or go put your gear on. And they said, you're going to wrestle this guy, Steve Austin. Well, my initial 2-year contract was just about up. I was pissed off, and I was sitting there with Brett because we were, riding together, and I was sitting in the locker room next to him, and he just said I would refuse to do it. And I said, yeah, I'm going to refuse to do it. So I went and I said, I went and talked to Bruce Pritchard. Basically, I was just like, what the hell do I have to do, man, to change my situation here? And I was just pissed off. And well, since my contract was up, they listened, and they didn't make me work with Steve Austin. So I refused to do a job for Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's one of my claims to fame. And the funny thing though about that was Fatu told me, he goes, you need to go tell Steve, right now, what's up? And I went to Steve, and he says, hey, I heard we're working together. I said, no, brother, we're not. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, here's the deal. It has nothing to do with you. It's the way they've been killing me off, and I had to take a stand. And he was like, dude, coming from his situation with WCW and the way he was fired, he goes, man, I completely understand. No hard feelings. And we became really good friends after that.
That's awesome.
And we actually rode together quite a bit. But since that worked that one time after Brett told me to do it, I started taking Brett's advice more often after that. Well, the problem was once I signed that new deal, and it was a 1-year rollover, and I signed that new deal, well, they weren't going to have me refusing to do anything because I was back under contract, and there was no fear of them losing me in their investment. Mm-hmm. So it didn't work as well after that. And Brett was giving me freaking advice like call Vince at his hotel room, or he gave me Vince's home number and had me call him there. And I was so out of my mind and stupid, I did it. And Vince was real nice to me, man. And I always make the joke his housekeeper was really nice to me. But I was doing stupid crap like that, man. And it didn't help me because then Vince started getting pissed off at me. And it wasn't long after where I ended up leaving. Matter of fact, I think it was only like 4 or 5 months into that next 1-year deal where we ended up parting ways. And Jerry Briscoe came up to me at a TV and said, Vince said you could go ahead on home. Because I was at the point where I was so frustrated. I was saying stupid shit to Vince. Like, if you're not going to use me better than this, you should send me home. Wow. So, I was just out of my head. But I was doing drugs and shit too, man. My body was all beat up, and I was on drugs, and I was pissed off at the world. So that was all that great advice, yes, that Brett the Hitman Hart gave me. I think he had a really good time at my expense.
And I mean, at that point, WWF was, the drug use was pretty rampant. Was it something that you had got into heavily in school? Or was it more like once you got into the business? And
I mainly, was drinking alcohol in college, and I even quit drinking when I started wrestling for them. I wasn't drinking alcohol or doing any drugs. But then you start to realize how much wear and tear that takes on your body. In reality, those days, the 300 plus days on the road a year, and then at one point later on I got a pretty serious injury wrestling with Triple H, and then the painkiller use got really insane because I hurt my back falling out of the ring. He shot me over the top rope, and I missed the top rope. Like catch it to break my fall. I was free fall right to the cement. Oof. And seated on my ass basically. So it just basically crushed my lower spine.
It's like that Mick Foley bump.
Yeah. But I was in a seated position. And when I couldn't move for a second. Actually, the ref came running out. He's like, "Are you all right?" And I told him to have Triple H waste some time, and because I was actually winning that match. So I had to crawl my ass back up in the ring, and we had to go home somehow. But after that point, I started taking painkillers, man, a lot more. Because, I didn't want to come off the road. I was working my way up to that pay-per-view with him at In Your House. And I didn't, if I took myself off the road because of injury, I knew I'd be done. So.
And that was sort of a big deal at that point because they were trying to get Triple H over, and then he had the curtain call thing, and so it was all sort of in that time frame. I feel like
it was all around the same time. That was right around the time I ended up leaving too. I left probably right after the curtain call and all that happened, and I had my deal with Triple H, and then they told me I was going to get some kind of revenge, which I never got. But more importantly, they said they were going to turn me heel after that, and they never did that. And that's what I was really angry about because I was really wanting to just turn heel. And so then after our pay-per-view, they sent him to do a 12-second job to the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 12. And then he gets into an issue with Mark Mara, who's just starting out. And I went right back to doing jobs for the heels that were coming in. So I got frustrated, man. I was so pissed, and I was irrational because I was on drugs, and every night I was at the bar. So, I just wasn't making good decisions, and of course, taking stupid advice from Bret Hart. I just got myself into more trouble. So, it just ended up ending the way it did. But
it's easy. It's easy in that state to sort of, self-justify just about every sort of stupid thing you can do, and
exactly.
And so like you just find yourself being like, I deserve better than this, and it's this is their fault for this, and it gets hard to get to a point of clarity again where you can
it took me a long time, man. I went back to Florida and it got a lot worse, but it's funny. I was that the one time Brett told me to call Vince at the hotel. We were at the hotel getting ready for the pay-per-view at In Your House, where I wrestled Triple H. And I just called Vince in the morning, and I was told I was not happy with the finish. And, they were going to have him hit me in the face with the garbage can lid and pin me like he did. And so Vince said, I'm going to eat my breakfast, and I'll call you back. And he called me back, and we started talking, and he basically said, well, it's not like we're pushing Duke the Dumpster to be the champion in 6 months or anything. And while I know that was not going to be the case, it still stung to hear it come out of his mouth. Yeah. I was like, damn, that's what he thinks of me. And then he said, just do what you always do. Show up with a smile on your face and do your job. So, and that's become a joke here lately, where I constantly say, fuck doing jobs. But that's the running gag, because there was a match after that, man, where I threw Triple H all over the place, and I was smiling at the camera like a jackass, which I think expedited me getting kicked out of there. But yeah, that's kind of how it went down, man. And I was just bitter, When I look back on it now, I realized there was a lot of things I could have done to get myself over. I was just, I looked around me and saw all these bitter people. I thought that's how you acted, but I should have just been positive and focused on getting myself over. A lot of guys did that.
It was also sort of a different time, where there was still that sort of runoff from the 80s, where it was like very, like every, and I feel like we've shifted a little bit as a mentality, as a society, a little bit on that, but yeah,
Vince was holding on to that for dear life. He thought that's the way it should have been. He went kicking and screaming into the Attitude Era. He did not want to go there, but finally he realized he had to do something. And as he said, he took the gloves off, and then the Attitude Era was born. But yeah, he was all about that PG family entertainment geared towards the kids with all the goofy characters. He thought that's what his wrestling was always going to be, and it just wasn't the case.
He still feels that way. I mean, I don't know if you watch any wrestling anymore, but
not too much.
Yeah, I'm not really.
You're not missing anything.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. It's funny though, because you mentioned calling Vince up about the finish to the match where you're going to get hit in the head with the trash can lid. And when you first came in, you had your thing with Lawler, and they had, where you and him did the bit where you interrupted King's Court or whatever. He called you out for King's Court. Mm-hmm. And then as you were walking off, he comes up and, hits you from behind and then gives you those. I mean, it was an awesome beatdown. I mean, it looked really good, but I mean,
it would have been great, but then they pulled the plug on it because it was too violent.
Yeah, they pulled, and then they even went on to say, "Well, we promise we'll never show anything like that again."
Exactly. So not only did I just get my ass beat with my own garbage can, now they're going to come on and say, "You'll never see that again." And I think I got hit by that can more than any of my opponents in the World Wrestling Federation.
He went to town. I mean, and it's Lawler, so it's not like it's. But I mean, he went to town.
Yeah, I was like, oh. It was great. We had so much heat, man. That could have been such a great match on a pay-per-view, and it never got a pay-per-view.
Oh man, yeah, and just that moment itself, it's one of those things that it feels like it could have jump-started like what they ended up the Attitude stuff a little earlier if they had.
And again, also, if I knowing what I know now, man, I probably would have stood up for myself a little harder and said, "Listen, this is a great thing, man. It's got a lot of heat. Don't kill it. Yeah. Give us a chance. We don't have to do that anymore, but let us run with this." And but I didn't understand a lot of things at that time.
Yeah, I remember it just being very weird to see Lawler come out, even though it was sort of gimmicky, the apology, and then even going on and apologizing. It was just it just felt very bizarre. Terrible. And it's
exactly, and it was. They made it into comedy, where he had to come out and apologize. I remember I got home. I was on the road and I was wore out. I just gotten home and I was taping all the shows when I was gone, and I put in the tape and watched it. I saw that, and I just went, man, they just totally killed it. They just dumped a bucket of ice water on what could have been a great angle, and that just took it in a totally different direction, and it sucked.
Yeah, really sort of broke the momentum on that, and
Yeah.
And that was like, and it was a very interesting time for Lawler in WWF too, because he was still like very much had some of that Memphis mentality, and still was like going out there and just cutting like, like sort of off the leash, and like cutting some really intense promos and saying whatever he wanted, getting a lot of heat, And
yeah, he had so much heat, man. It was so easy to work with him. I mean, you didn't hardly have to do anything as a baby face versus Jerry Lawler in the WWF in those days. Now, Memphis, that's another story. He's king baby face. But in the WWF, man, he was one of the most hated people, and he didn't even wrestle that much. It was mainly from commentary.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. His later commentaries, I thought, got really insufferable after a while. But like the stuff where he was, always messing with Bret Hart, going out and messing with Stu Hart was always like super entertaining.
Yep. Yeah. And that was right around that same time, so they kind of threw me into an angle with him when he was already kind of in an angle with Bret Hart.
Yeah.
Just working their way up through that. So yeah, that was kind of, and then the next thing they do is on, I guess it was a SummerSlam maybe, or King of the Ring. He goes and wrestles Roddy Piper instead of me. Jerry Lawler did. I was like, oh man, I could even as clueless as I was, I saw the writing on the wall there.
Yeah, that's tough. And then going back to the Triple H feud for a little bit. You were sort of in with the Bone Street kind of. I mean, was there any tension between you and him, like at that point, or was it like did you guys have like a good working relationship?
With who, Brett? Or
no, I was Triple H at that point.
Oh yeah. No. Look, the whole it's funny. The Clique, was a thing. Everybody knows about it. And the Bone Street Crew, or Bone Street Killers, at one point it was called. But the thing about the BSK was it just kind of came about because there was a bunch of the other guys that were not in the Clique that just wanted to have their own crew, and they hung out together and they drank together, and Undertaker was like the leader of it. But I think at some point everybody that wasn't in the Clique was in BSK. Officially or unofficially. I was not an official member. The official members of BSK you saw come back on Raw with that thing with the Undertaker when he was retiring or whatever it was. Yeah. That was the guys that were real BSK. Yeah. A lot of us hung around with all of them, and we were kind of part of it, but not like those guys. Those guys were all really good, close friends.
But so
sounds
there was
like the NWO almost.
It is just a million.
I mean, yeah, if they would have put that stuff on the screen, it would have been great. But no, they didn't. It was just behind the scenes.
Yeah. So there wasn't any sort of like issues working with Hunter because of that. I mean, did you guys work well together? I mean, did you have
we worked well together because he was willing to do whatever I wanted him to. I threw him all over the place, and he took a beating, but he was willing. And he is he was and is a great worker, a great wrestler. And but he let me throw his ass all over the place. And because obviously he was going to win. So the more I did to him, in the end, when he pinned me, the stronger it made him look. But there were some nights where I'd take it out on him a little bit stiff, just because I was just a little pissed off that I wasn't getting the push I wanted. But nothing. I didn't go out of my way to hurt or injure him or anybody else. But yeah, he knew I was there sometimes.
Yeah. Well, then it ended up costing you your hair at the end of it.
Yeah, what we did there, that was part of the discussions of turning me a heel. When we were talking about it, we were at TV, and we were in Vince's office at the TV in the building. And it was me and Vince, and probably I know JR was there. Briscoe was there because I think Briscoe was like Vince's bodyguard or something. And then I think Bruce Pritchard was there, and we were talking about what I wanted to do with the angle with Triple H. And I said, listen, I know I'm not going to beat him. I said that, and that's all fine. And and I want to turn heel afterwards anyway. And when we started talking about me turning heel, I said, I want to change my appearance and turn heel. And JR chimed in, well, how about this? Why don't we do a deal where he cuts your hair as part of this angle to make it a hotter angle? And then afterwards, you got the shorter hair and you turn heel. I said, yeah. I said, I looked around the room because I knew it was a big deal for me. I looked around the room and I looked right at Vince and I said, I'm willing to do that as long as I get some kind of revenge at the end. I said, now I know I'm not going to pin him and I know I ain't going to cut his hair. I know I'm not stupid. I said, but I got to get some kind of revenge and I got to turn heel. And Vince said, well, yeah, pal, absolutely. None of that shit happened.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And so, I mean, it wasn't long after that you guys parted ways.
Yeah, I just got so pissed off. I was when they didn't turn me heel. I was really sick of being there. And I remember it's so stupid. Macho Man used to always say, "Don't ever take yourself out of the game," and that's a very important thing in wrestling. You really don't ever want to take yourself out of the game. And I was having conversations with like Steve Austin and Bret Hart saying, I'm done, man. I'm so done. I'm sick of this place. I need to get out of here. And they're like, man, you should probably think twice about leaving, man. Don't take yourself off. Don't take yourself off the road. Don't take yourself out of this company. I said, yeah, but I just can't keep doing it like this. They're killing me. So I was all pissed off and angry and depressed at the same time. And, those guys, some of them would try to talk some sense into me, but I wasn't having it. And through my stupid conversations with Vince, finally at one point he sent Briscoe in there to tell me at TV, I think it was like in Vancouver. He said, yeah, Vince said you can go head on home. And I just remember like thinking, damn, it's over. I sat down there for a minute. I wanted to cry in the locker room, I think, but I had to be a freaking man and not cry. But I realized, holy shit, it just ended.
Was that a sense of relief? Was it a sense of like some fear, or was it at that point like everything was sort of numbed down because of all the pain?
All of the above, not relief though. I don't know, man. I was just like, oh my God, they just told me to go home. I didn't think they were going to do that. You see, because at one point Vince said he was going to send me to Memphis and train as a heel. That was what I was expecting to happen. And the funny thing, he's going to pay me $1,000 a week, he said, right? $1,000 a week at that time was way more than I was making in the damn WWF. They were fucking starving me. And then I made the faithful mistake of saying at the end of that conversation, yeah, Vince, but I'm going to need it in writing. And I think from that point on, he had no intention of sending me to Memphis.
Yeah.
Like, how dare he was thinking, I could see the look on his face. It looked like he bit into a turd sandwich. He just went, okay, all right, pal.
Okay, pal.
I can tell that I said something wrong. You start holding Vince to freaking legalities and shit like that, he doesn't like it. He feels threatened. So that was the end of it.
Man, so I mean, I don't think you didn't go back until WrestleMania 17, right?
I mean, yeah, I went home and went off the freaking chain with drugs and everything. Just I went back to working with the independent in Florida that I had worked for before WWF, and they fired me. That's how bad off I was. And when that thing with WrestleMania 17 came up, I was still working for that company in Florida. I had bought a wrestling ring, and I was just basically training the students for that company. And somebody told me about the Gimmick Battle Royal, and I called Bruce Pritchard, and they agreed to let me come up and be in it. But I was in no condition to wrestle. Thank God I didn't have to wrestle. I just walked around and punched and kicked a bunch. But
I mean, look who. I mean, Iron Sheik won that match because he could not take the bump over.
No, he could not go over the top rope. That's a shoot. He couldn't go over the top rope, so they had to do it the way they did it.
I mean, look how long it took. I mean, took longer to get to the ring than Undertaker.
That famous line of Bobby Heenan's.
Yes.
By the time he gets down here, it'll be WrestleMania 38 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was
freaking
classic.
funny, dude.
He's incredible. Yeah, what are your thoughts looking back on that, and what were your thoughts at the time of like getting to do that and sort of being in that atmosphere again?
On one hand, look, when I got there, like I said, I was on drugs, and honestly, I was I was to the point when I was living in Miami at that time where I was running out of money and stuff, so I had to start going to a damn methadone clinic. And so I had to get 3 days worth of methadone to take with me, so I didn't get sick.
Yeah,
to WrestleMania with me, just so I could make it. And so that's the state of mind I was in. That's how sick I was.
Yeah,
and I was embarrassed. I was totally out of shape. I mean, I was skinny and pasty white and in horrible shape, and I was embarrassed. So I kind of hid from most people. I didn't say hi to a lot of people. I was just embarrassed. And but I will say it was WrestleMania. I got to be in a WrestleMania, and
not just a WrestleMania. What's
probably the best one ever.
Yeah, what's widely considered one of the greatest of all time.
And I mean, walking out in front of 65,000 people plus, that was insane. Even though most of them didn't know who the hell I was, it was insane walking out in front of that. Because before that, I mean, when I was in the WWF, before the Attitude Era, man, we were lucky to get houses of 10, 15,000. That was a lot.
It was like the Manhattan Center every night.
Yeah, it was. But the WrestleMania, that one with the 65,000 in the Astrodome, that was something else. And yeah, it was a hell of a long walk to the ring.
Yeah, and yeah, man. So after that, I mean, how long after that before you were like, shit, man, I gotta get my act together. I gotta get my shit straight. I mean, and what was it? Was there a moment in particular that sort of was, I don't want to sound cliche, but like your come to Jesus moment, rock bottom, like whatever you want to call it.
Well, I will say I was at the point where I had lost that wrestling job. I was unemployable. I could not work anywhere. I was so strung out on drugs and alcohol that I was living basically in like a flop house, a drug house, sleeping on a mattress in the middle of a room, a dirty room in this dirty house. My money ran out. My credit ran out on the street. I couldn't get a bottle of liquor on credit anymore. I couldn't get any drugs from any of my drug dealer friends. They all just kind of cut me off. And when that happened, I don't know if you know about opiates, but man, when you come off of opiates cold turkey, when you're that addicted, the withdrawals are horrible. It can kill you. Horrible to the point where my body basically seized up and I couldn't get off the floor. So an ambulance, they had to call the ambulance to come get me and take me to the hospital. And they shot me up with some morphine just to kick me out of it. And said, you need to go to rehab. I said, you think? So then my family flew me up to Tennessee, where I went to rehab the first time in 2003. I went to Vanderbilt Hospital. It took me 10 days just to detox off of the slew of stuff that was in my system. And it was very difficult. But when I got out of there, unfortunately, I didn't really work a program of recovery. I just figured I was going to stay clean and sober on my own willpower. And I went back to school and got a master's degree and became a teacher and a coach and all these things. But looming in the back of my, they always say the devil's in the parking lot doing push-ups. In recovery, what that means is if you're not working a solid program of recovery, your addiction is waiting for a moment of weakness. And my moment of weakness was a physical injury to my foot. In 2009, I had this injury to my foot that
I was going to ask about this because this sounded like
yeah, it was pretty catastrophic. And my foot, if you ever saw Marty Jannetty's foot, it was kind of turned to the side like that. And mine was turned to the side like that for a long time. And I made the mistake of starting to take drugs again, painkillers, and I shouldn't have. And it was a relapse, and it moved really fast. I remember one day
you pick up where you left off, basically.
Well,
I start up, and then all of a sudden,
I basically did. I asked a friend one day if they knew anybody could get some pills. They got me 5 pills. Within the next 2 days, I had 2 full bottles of pills of 90 painkillers from 2 separate doctors. Because that's how bad my foot was. It was easy for me to get it. And, I always tell people that wrestlers invented doctor shopping. We finely tuned it. We were very good at doctor shopping. And, it moved that fast. And then I graduated to IV drug use. I was shooting up morphines or whatever pills I could shoot up. And I was still a teacher, man. I was barely hanging on for dear life as a school teacher. And by night, I would be running around with all these people in the street getting drugs, and I wasn't getting my foot fixed. And I ended up having 2 surgeries, and I got a staph infection deep in my left foot. So we ended up having to make the call and amputate my foot. So I had to have my foot cut off. And again, I'm still on drugs during all this time, and I'm still out there doing stuff on the streets. And basically what I was doing was, what I got busted for was delivery of Schedule 2 and Schedule 3. I had sold some time-released Oxycontin and some Suboxone, which was like methadone.
Yeah.
Somebody who was a snitch, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I was doing that is I was getting those from my doctor, but they weren't strong enough for me, and I couldn't shoot them up. So I would sell them to get the drugs I wanted so I could shoot up.
Yeah.
Which is basically breaking the law. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And
to get what I needed. And that's how I got set up, and that's how I got busted. But, I always say it was the worst day of my life and the greatest day of my life at the same time. Those guys arrested me who saved my life. It was September the 13th, Friday the 13th, 2013 at 3 p.m. Exactly, because I was getting ready to go out the door and find a drug dealer that said they had some drugs for me. And the cops were standing on my back porch holding their badge up. And that's when I knew it was over. So I had already lost my foot and all those things. And I had to go to court. And before I went to court, I put myself in rehab because I knew I needed help to physically get off the drugs. But I also knew once I was physically clean, I was willing this time to do whatever it took to never go back. And that's what I do now, man, on a daily basis. I take care of my recovery. I don't just ignore it. I don't just try to work on willpower or won't power, as a counselor once told me. But I work on it every day, and I try to also help other people because that in turn helps me. I got the podcast, Road to Recovery. I work for the drug court program here, which I actually went through. And now those are the things that I do to keep my sobriety and my recovery. And it's still working. I'm at about 7.5 years clean now.
That's awesome, man.
I'm just going to continue doing it. I have no plans of going back there ever. It's a miserable existence.
It's a really hard road. And, when I was talking to you before we were setting this up, I mentioned my past addictions, and I was in a unique place where I did all this shit when I was really young. I did a lot of stupid shit as a teenager. The first time I smoked weed, I was probably 11. The first time I took acid, I was 12. I was doing painkillers. I was stealing, painkillers at 13, 14 years old and doing Percocets and Endosets daily, and. I was at a developmental age where I didn't, you don't even understand the concept of addiction. You're so invincible that it can't possibly happen to you. So you can sort of just not do it for a while and you're like, yeah, I'm fine. And you don't make the connection that you feel like shit after doing a bunch of pills for 2 weeks And the reason you feel like shit and you're angry and grumpy at everybody is like because of the fact that you're detoxing and
your
and like
body's trying to make you do more.
But once your brain makes that connection, like it's really hard. And I remember it was years of that, and I'm glad in a way that I got that out of the way when I did, right? Because I had less consequences, and I also grew up at the end of a time when there was a little bit more leniency in what you could get away with as a kid than you can now. But I mean, there's so much to lose when you start.
Plus, if you think about it now, man, the game has changed completely out of the streets. There's this shit called fentanyl now that's out there that's killing people. They're dropping like flies.
It's
and
crazy.
Drug dealers are mixing it in with drugs and other drugs and making pills out of it. It's called fentanyl. From China and from Mexico, and it kills people.
I
literally.
remember when that shit first hit, man. Like a long time ago. Like I had a friend who had rheumatoid arthritis. He was in his like 50s, and when he was a kid, he was like a poster child for this stuff, and he had every drug under the sun, man. They would prescribe this guy because like he literally couldn't move his arms, he couldn't do anything. And I remember like when they first came out with fentanyl, like they had the patch, and he used to tell me, he's like, I just want some good weed because like he's like, I'd rather just do that than like put all these opiates in because this is just a heroin patch, He's like, I gotta put a patch of heroin on. And, I just remember being like, just thinking like, it's just crazy that like, this is how we're dealing with these things instead of trying to help people. Like I look at the work Diamond Dallas Page does, and like, if there was some sort of like work like that with people, as far as like their physical well-being goes, like what can you do to help, especially in like the professional wrestling community with people whose bodies are broken, but even in the world of the service industry where you're on your feet cooking all day and getting burned, like to have, instead of these outlets where it's like it's like late at night, you're getting done, there's the only places that are open to get food or either fast food or a bar or like whatever, and you're sort of railroaded into these unhealthier choices,
into the bad food, into unhealthy lifestyle, into the drugs, because the pharmaceutical companies control government with their lobbying and all this money and millions and billions and trillions of dollars. Well, all these companies keep Americans unhealthy as possible so they can keep selling them drugs. Whereas if you just get healthy, that's why DDP has such an impact. He naturally trains people, helps them lose weight, get healthy, change themselves inside and out. And that goes a long way, man, in taking care of a lot of the injuries and the pain that you suffer from, even from wrestling. It's amazing how much of an effect just losing some weight has on your health, and getting away from the drugs and getting away from the processed foods and the garbage. Which is one of my addictions now, and I'm working on it. Knock on wood, I'm working on it. But
there's always going to be something. I think of all the things you're in a probably much better place.
Yeah, and one thing I've realized too, though, is even in a lot of these situations, you can look at it and say, if I handle this like I handled my drug addiction, I'll probably have more success. When you start thinking about how your mind processes things, whether it's drugs or junk food to make you feel better or whatever it is, whatever the addiction is, it's all about obsession and compulsion in your brain. And when you learn how to handle that and train your brain and deal with the way you react to the world around you, you are a lot more successful at taking all this nonsense out of your life.
Yeah, it's amazing how much effort, how much drive and energy is put into, just like maintaining like a high as an addict. And like, if you think about like the amount of passion and energy that you put into that you could like generally focus onto anything else, it's really,
we used to always joke and say, man, if, I'm so grateful that I don't have to wake up dope sick anymore. First of all, let me say that, because when you're in an active addiction, every morning you wake up in a panic. You're about to get sick, and you got to figure out how to get your drugs or how to get money to get your drugs or how to get both. And it becomes this chase, a daily chase to get that just to feel normal. And we have the most interesting ways of scheming and scamming and coming up with money and drugs, and it just always seemed to work. And I always say, if we could put that effort into legitimate business, we would all be running Fortune 500 freaking companies,
and
man.
just building
Damn.
honest relationships, like that same sort of effort. Yeah. And it,
can find some money now.
Well, I'm genuinely glad that you're doing well, and I would love it if you just take a moment and talk a little bit about your podcast. Tell us where to find it, where to find everything else you're doing, and if there's ways that any of us can support the work groups you're working with and what you're doing. If there's ways we can do that, we'd love to know, and we'll share that out on our socials.
Absolutely, man. Everything we're doing right now is through Facebook with the podcast. I work with a group called WWAB Podcast Network. WWAB stands for Wrestling with Anything But. That was the original podcast that Avi Klein used to do. And it was a great podcast. I did his show about 2 years ago, and it was so different to me. The angle he took, he would interview wrestlers, but like not necessarily talk that much about wrestling. And I think he impacted a lot of guys in that way. And a lot of people ended up wanting to work with him. And he put together this network. His first guy was Ray Lloyd Glacier. He started a podcast with him. And he was always talking to me about doing one. And then he put it together during this COVID thing when nobody was working, basically.
What else are you going to do? Podcast.
We have Paul Roma, we have Ray Lloyd, we have Del Wilkes, the Patriot, Bill DeMott, which is Hugh Morris. Now we got Ken Patera. All these guys got podcasts as well as me throughout the week, and they are all live, and they are all on Facebook Live, free for people to watch. It's streamed through StreamYard, just like this podcast.
StreamYard, yeah.
And my podcast is on Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. It's called The Road to Recovery. And of course, what do I talk about? A lot of recovery issues, whether it's substance abuse or other things that people have been through, negative situations where they've come out on the other side and found redemption and changed their lives. Those are the types of stories we'd like to tell. And those are the types of people we like to talk to on The Road to Recovery. And again, it's 6 p.m. Eastern time on Facebook. Man, it's on my Facebook page, which is Mike Drose. It's on Avi Klein's Facebook page. It's on all those other wrestlers' Facebook pages live. We all play everybody's stuff. So awesome. It's all over Facebook. We're getting millions of views live every week.
Hell yeah.
Which is great. Again, it's Facebook and it's free, but, baby steps. But we're still not even a year in. We're basically like 8 or 9 months in, and everybody's doing really great numbers. And people really seem to be responding to all of the different shows, and they all got different things that they talk about, and different subjects that they handle, and it's just a great group to be involved with. So yeah, that's what I'm basically doing now. So come check us out, man, on Facebook.
Absolutely.
You won't be able to friend request me because my friends list is full, but everything I do is public, man. So you won't miss anything. Everything I do is public. Yeah, so you'll see it all.
There's worse problems you can have than having too many friends, man.
Yeah, well, sometimes you got to thin the herd, too. You get a couple of wackos out there, but that's okay. I'll shape sizes.
Oh, man. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on with us. Again, very happy that you're able to share your story and your journey with other people and help them find their own road to recovery. And we're going to go check out WWAB Podcast Network on Facebook for sure.
Link is in all the comments of everywhere we are currently live.
Awesome.
And will be in the description of the audio podcast.
Awesome.
Right on. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me, man.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. We've been Such Good Shoot. Have a great week.